Hello and welcome to Trails Worth Hiking, the show that brings you some of the most interesting backpacking and trekking routes in the world. I'm your host, Jeremy Pendry. In the first part of the show, we bring you the story and history of a trail. Then we tell you what it's like to hike the trail and how you can do it. On this episode, we go back to Europe, where we will travel 1,400 kilometers through a lightly visited but truly legendary region of Europe. We'll stay in private homes and welcoming villages and eat home-cooked meals as we traverse mountains, plateaus, and forests. And we'll have to keep our eyes peeled for signs of a famous historical resident of this region, Vlad the Impaler, also known as Vlad Dracula, or as we have come to know him today in a mythologized form, Count Dracula. On this episode of Trails Worth Hiking, we travel the Via Transilvanica in Transylvania, Romania. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I want to remind you that you can see photos of the hikes we cover on the show and more on our Instagram account at Trails Worth Hiking Podcast. Let's start with our Walking the Walk segment, where we give a shout out to listeners who were inspired by the show to hike a trail after listening to an episode about it. Listener Han Nguyen hiked the Tour de Mont Blanc in August with 3 of her girlfriends. She heard on a prior Walking the Walk segment that this was one of the hardest hikes one of our listeners had done. And she said that that's no exaggeration. It was a very hard hike for her as well. But she said it was also luxury backpacking. They had almost perfect weather throughout the first 10 days in August, with only a couple days of light rain. And they were very excited that they were able to do the hike and glad they were able to do it because of learning about it on the show. So congratulations to Han Nguyen for hiking the Tour de Mont Blanc last August. Our guest on this episode is Veronica McGee. Veronica is originally from Romania, though she has lived in the United States a long time. Over the last several years, she's hiked 3 sections of the Via Transilvanica on separate trips with family and friends, and she plans to continue hiking it until she finishes it, which we will hear about in my conversation with Veronica. So why am I covering the Via Transilvanica? First, as many longtime listeners will know, my goal is to cover trails in all corners of the globe. And some of these hikes are legendary, but others, like this one, are brand new. I love that the Via Transilvanica, although new, was ambitious and done on a grand scale. This is a major hike. 1,400 kilometers is about 870 miles. So it's a big trek, and I love it crosses a huge region of a country that, although it's in Europe, still seems to have a wild edge to it, which we'll hear about from Veronica as well. I also love that the Via Transilvanica encapsulates not only mountains and forests, but also small local villages that most visitors to Romania would never have seen had they not hiked this trail. And as I said, it's a new trail, and I love that about it as well, because it's not really yet discovered by many people. It's not crowded yet. It's really an opportunity to go out and hike a really long distance trail in an area that doesn't have a lot of hikers and a lot of tourist infrastructure. Although there is some tourist infrastructure, as we'll hear from Veronica, near the beginning of the hike, but it seems like it gets less and less as you go. So get out there now while you still can before it becomes too crowded. Before we jump into the history of the area and the trail, I want to remind you about our limited time offer from our sponsor, Outdoor Herbivore. Right now, you can get 15% off all hot meals on Outdoor Herbivore backpacking meals. Outdoor Herbivore makes high-quality vegetarian and vegan backpacking meals, but as I always say, you don't need to be vegan or vegetarian to enjoy the meals. They're delicious. They have lots of calories for a hungry hiker. They use quality ingredients, and they're packaged in a way that makes them easy to heat up in the packaging with hot water. And they're packaged fairly tightly, unlike a lot of brands of backpacking meals, so that you can actually fit a fair number of them in a bear can or in your backpack if you're going on a longer hike, which really is a valuable feature for me. So right now you can get 15% off with the discount code TWH15HOT, TWH15HOT, to get 15% off all hot meals that they carry. You've heard me talk about some of my favorite meals, like the chickpea sesame ziti or the naked freckled burrito, to name a couple. But there are lots of other good ones there that you can check out on Outdoor Herbivore's website. This offer will only last throughout the spring, so even maybe by our next episode, that may be the end of it, we have some additional promotions coming from Outdoor Herbivore. So go now to Outdoor Herbivore and get your hot backpacking meals for the summer season using the code TWH15HOT. Thanks again to Outdoor Herbivore for sponsoring the show. In addition to supporting our sponsor, Outdoor Herbivore, there's one other way you can help the show that I want to mention. If you are going on an international trek like the one we are covering on this episode, it's a good idea to have a travel credit card that has generous and flexible points that can be earned to help you with accommodations and flights. I recently got the Chase Sapphire Preferred card because I've been trying to up my travel hacking game, get more free stuff, more free accommodations, more free flights. The Chase Sapphire card has a great rewards point system for travelers where you can transfer reward points to numerous different hotel chains and airline partners. So you're not just limited to one airline or one hotel chain like you might be with a credit card put out by the particular chain or airline. The Chase Sapphire Preferred does have an annual fee, but if you use the rewards benefits, it can be well worth the fee. I think the fee's $95, right around there. If you are someone who pays off your credit card balance in full every month, then you may want to consider this. If you are someone who carries a balance, then please do not get yourself another credit card. Make sure that you are paying it off in full every month and never paying interest before you even consider getting a travel rewards credit card. But if you are in the market for a travel rewards credit card, the Chase Sapphire Preferred card is one of several great options out there. And one way that you can help the show is to apply through the link that I'll put in the show notes. Chase does not sponsor the show, but if you apply through the link, that will give me extra rewards points at no cost to you. So if you decide to get the card, thanks in advance for helping the show. All right, with those announcements out of the way, let's talk about Romania. Romania is a country in Eastern Europe. It's in the area where Eastern Europe meets Central Europe and a little bit towards Southern Europe. It's kind of in a crossroads kind of location. Romania contains the Carpathian Mountains. Transylvania, which is the region of this hike, is bordered on the south and the east by separate ranges of the Carpathians. And the part of Transylvania that's not in the mountains themselves essentially forms a plateau behind the Carpathian Mountains. The name Transylvania, if you think of trans as in crossing, silva or silvestri as in forest and woods, Transylvania means the other side of the woods or the far side of the woods or beyond the woods. The Danube River flows through Romania, as Veronica will talk about, and flows out into the Black Sea from Romania. So let's start with a little history. Why is it called Romania? Humans have lived in the area since Paleolithic times, so going back many thousands of years. But we'll start our story with the kingdom of Dacia, which started in 82 BC and lasted until 106 AD. Dacia was conquered by the Romans, and the area was made the Roman province of, you guessed it, Romania. The Emperor Trajan was the ruler of Rome at the time, and his armies conquered the area that became Romania after 2 wars. The Romans conquering Romania is, of course, important for the history of Romania. For example, today the Romanian language, which is spoken in Romania and Moldova, as well as being a minority language in some surrounding countries, is a Romance language, like Italian, French, Spanish, and Portuguese, which are languages in other regions that were also at one time conquered by the Romans. Each of these languages is different, of course, as Latin was shaped and changed by the local languages, and they were separated from each other over time by distance and different peoples. But Romania was indeed, at one time, part of the Roman Empire, and its language reflects that. Once the Roman Empire receded, The area was under the control of various other empires, states, and kingdoms at various times, including the Goths, the Huns, the Slavs, and the Bulgarians, among others. In the year 1002, Transylvania became part of the Hungarian kingdom. That lasted until 1570, when the Ottoman Empire took control, with some power being shared by the Habsburgs of Europe, starting in 1690. But more on the Ottoman time period in a bit. The modern Romanian state is viewed as beginning in the mid-19th century. But even that has to take into account further back and forth with Hungary that happened after that. And then there was even the Kingdom of Romania in the early 20th century. But by the end of the Second World War, the modern state in its current shape was essentially in place. After World War II, Romania stayed firmly behind the Iron Curtain, under Soviet influence, under a communist regime until that regime fell in 1989. Nicolas Ceausescu, the communist dictator of Romania, was ousted and killed when the communist regime fell. Romania today is firmly part of Europe. It joined the NATO military alliance in 2004, and it joined the European Union in 2007. And on March 31st of this year, 2024, it became a member of the Schengen zone. The Schengen zone is a zone of European countries, pretty much most of the EU, that have visa requirements that are viewed together. And what that means is if you go to Europe, you can essentially stay for 90 days if you're an American, and then you have to leave. So you can only be there 90 days out of every 180 days. Until recently, if people wanted to stay in Europe for longer than 90 days, they would go to somewhere like Romania or Bulgaria and spend some time in those countries and then go back to the rest of Europe, the Schengen zone. But this year, Romania and Bulgaria as well both joined the Schengen zone. So if you're planning to spend a long period of time in Europe at any point on a tourist visa, you might have to go somewhere like Ireland or the UK for a while before you come back, because Romania is now part of the Schengen zone. Although there's still border controls probably until the end of this calendar year, at which point it'll be fully open borders like the rest of Europe. So that's a little bit on the history of Romania itself, but let's talk about Romania in the popular imagination. And that's where we talk about, as I referenced in the intro, Vlad the Impaler, or Vlad III, or Vlad Tepes, or Vlad Dracula. These are all names that he was known by. Let's start with one somewhat disappointing fact for our purposes. Vlad Dracula was a ruler of Wallachia, not Transylvania, though it seems likely he was born in Transylvania when his father was living there in exile from Wallachia. Wallachia is the province just to the south of Transylvania, so very close to it, and still part of Romania today. You probably thought I was going to say that it's disappointing that he was not actually a vampire, and that is probably also true. Though after you hear the rest of the story, you can judge for yourself whether who he actually was is more or less scary than a vampire. Bram Stoker's Count Dracula, the mythical vampire, lived in a dilapidated castle in the Carpathian Mountains of Transylvania. But the historical Vlad Dracula was a ruler of Wallachia, the land to the south of Transylvania. Today, he's considered an important, although maybe controversial, historical figure, and considered a Romanian national hero by many. So let's talk about who this guy was. Vlad Dracula was the second son of Vlad Dracul, Prince of Wallachia. The technical title his father had was Voivod of Wallachia, which if you say that word in a certain way, it does resemble the English word warlord, Voivod, warlord, and that's essentially what the title is. So it's something like a prince, but maybe more of a military-type leader. So Vlad Dracul, the father, who was Vlad II, was called Vlad Dracul because he was a member of the Order of the Dragon, or Drac, an order of nobles established to fight the Ottoman Empire and defend the Catholic Church against heretics and pagans. So this is in the mid-15th century, and at this time the Ottoman Empire was pushing into Europe. And so many of these warlords or local leaders joined this Order of the Dragon to help resist the Ottoman Empire. So Dracula, his son's name, simply signifies that he is the son of Dracul. And as I said, Dracul simply means that he is from the order of the Drac, the order of the dragon. In 1442, when Vlad Dracula and his brother Radu were fairly young, they and their father went to a meeting with the Ottomans, and the Ottomans held them both hostage to secure their father's loyalty. And Vlad and his brother were then essentially raised by the Ottomans. They were raised well, and they were given lots of good military skills and literature and all the things a young nobleman would expect to learn, but they were captives. And eventually his father was murdered. A power struggle followed, and eventually Vlad Dracula tried to take power. He started purging enemies, including Transylvanian Saxons who opposed him. He captured a group of them, brought them back to Wallachia, and had them impaled on spikes, a torturous form of execution that I won't go into details about, but let's just say it's a slow and awful way to die. There's also a story about him inviting all of the local nobles of Wallachia to a feast, and then having all of them impaled. And even later on, he impaled all of the Ottoman prisoners he held, and Mehmet himself, the ruler of the Ottomans, apparently came and saw them all impaled when he arrived at Târgoviște, Wallachia's capital city, where he found it deserted except for all the impaled Ottoman prisoners. So this is where his moniker, Vlad the Impaler, comes from. And these were not the only times that he used impaling as a political tool. In fact, at one point, Mehmet sent 2 envoys to Vlad to get Vlad to pay homage to him, and Vlad had the envoys impaled. So much for that. As you might imagine, Vlad ended up at war with the Ottomans, and after years of fighting the Ottomans, he went to Transylvania to get help, but was imprisoned by the Hungarians who controlled the area at the time. And they held him prisoner for 12 years. When he was released, he went back to fighting the Ottomans again. But ultimately in 1477, he died in battle with the Ottomans. At the end of the day, he had ruled Wallachia over 3 separate time periods. He has been viewed as a just but harsh ruler who fought to save Romania, the gateway to Europe, from the invading Muslim Ottomans. If you haven't seen the Netflix docudrama miniseries Vlad versus Mehmet, I highly recommend it. It's part of Netflix's Rise of Empires series of docudramas. It's both entertaining and educational. So the question you might be asking yourself is, how do we go from a rebel ruler who fought the Ottoman Empire literally for decades to his death to a vampire in a black cape? Well, Bram Stoker's book was published in 1897, a long time after Vlad Dracula's life, and a long time before good info was available on the internet. Stoker apparently knew very little about the historical Dracula. The word Drac doesn't just mean dragon, but can also mean devil. So that may have played a role in Stoker using the name. And Stoker may have at least known that Vlad Dracula had a reputation for horrible, bloody executions. One scholar notes that it appears that he was going to use a different name, Count Wampir, which I guess is derived from the word vampire, until he came across the historical Dracula. Some of the history of the actual Dracula eventually made it into Stoker's book, but it appears he created the character before he knew about the historical Dracula. So what is Vlad Dracula, the historical figure's actual connection to the trail through Transylvania? Well, the trail goes through Sighișoara, the town where Vlad Dracula was likely born, and where his birth home still exists. The town is a UNESCO World Heritage Site because of its well-preserved old town. And if you hike the trail, you can visit it and see the home where this legendary Romanian figure was likely born, and where, at least in some way, the story of Dracula was born. Let's talk about the history of the Via Transilvanica itself. And I have to say, this also involves a really interesting character. And another real character in Romanian history, though in current Romanian history, that is worth learning about. So the project to build the Via Transilvanica came about through a charity called Trailsworthhiking Social, which is an NGO, and the project began in 2018, so not that long ago. As I mentioned, the trail goes 1,400 kilometers, which is about 870 miles. It goes through 10 counties of Transylvania. They finished building the trail in October 2022, and it was launched in an event at Alba Iulia. The trail is signposted every kilometer with andesite milestones, or I guess kilometer stones, each of which is a unique carved work of art. The Via Transilvanica is the first long-distance trail in Romania, and 10,000 volunteers were involved in building it. In 2023, it won a cultural prize, the Europa Nostra Prize. It won the Public Choice Award. The trail was founded by two brothers, Alin and Tiberiu Ușeriu. Tiberiu is the figure that I wanted to talk about, who has a really interesting past. Alin and Tiberiu had a difficult childhood, and Tiberiu ended up eventually in Spain committing petty crime as a young adult. He somehow got involved with Serbian mafia, stealing cars and robbing jewelry stores in France, Germany, and Austria. But in 1999, he eventually got caught, and he was sentenced to 15 years in a German prison. After serving almost 10 years, he was released and deported to Romania. So that could have been the end of our story. We could have had a petty criminal who eventually spends a long time in jail and then disappears into obscurity, but that's not what happened. Luckily for Tiberiu, his brother Alin was already working for the NGO that I mentioned, Trailsworthhiking Social, and Tiberiu started helping out. It was then that Tiberiu also started running, and he started running in the mountains of Romania with his two dogs primarily. And he started running a lot and longer distances and realized how good it felt to run. And eventually he started doing marathons. And then he started doing ultra marathons. And then in 2015, he learned about the 6633 Arctic Ultra, an ultra marathon in the Arctic Circle. It's a brutal race where you're mostly out there alone in the Arctic pulling a sled that carries your food and equipment. The current version of the long distance form of the race is 380 miles or 563 kilometers. Well, Tiberiu won the race 3 times in a row from 2016 to 2018. He won the 350-mile version 2 years in a row. And when they upped the distance to 380 miles, he won that as well. So Tiberiu is not only a Romanian with an interesting checkered past and a champion runner, but also one of the fathers and founders of the Via Transilvanica, along with his brother Alin. I think all of Romania at this point is grateful that Tiberiu put his skills to good use when he went back into society after serving time in prison. So from Vlad Dracula to Tiberiu Ușeriu, Romania has fascinating stories to tell. With that background, let's hear my conversation with Veronica McGee about the Via Transilvanica. Veronica McGee, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So Veronica, we're going to talk today about a trail in Romania, and you are originally from Romania. What can you tell me about that?
That's right. I was born in Romania, more specifically in northern Romania. It's a region called Bucovina. It was named by the Austrians. It means the land of the beech trees. So that part of the country was under the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and now it's part of Romania since 1918. And I grew up actually in the foothills of the Carpathians, and it is a coincidence that my county is the start of the Via Transilvanica. So my luck.
That's really cool. Yeah, I was going to say when you said the name, that's the name of the first region of the trail. So that's really cool.
That's right, yes.
But now you live in the United States, but you went back to Romania to a few times now to hike sections of this trail. Can you tell me a little bit about before doing that? Have you been doing trekking for a long time, or is it something you're new to, or what's your background in doing these kinds of hikes?
Well, I grew up in the mountains, so I played in the mountains. I hiked a lot before hiking even had a name. It was just something we did, right? We spent our afternoons going up into the woods and by the river and doing all kinds of fun things. So hiking has always been my thing. And my husband has done a lot of hiking within the United States, like Bob Marshall Wilderness, and then some in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State. So when we met, we did a lot of hiking together. And actually, he proposed on top of Stone Mountain, which is not really a big mountain. It's just kind of like a rock here in Atlanta. So that's our thing. That's what we do. And once we had our daughter, Ilinka, we took her on hikes. And she hikes with us. It's not her favorite thing to do because she's almost a teenager. So she has other things that are her favorite things to do. But we still hike a lot. That's how we spend our holidays. So we go to Europe every year. We're really fortunate to be able to do that. And we go hiking every year. So not only in Romania, like in the Swiss Alps, in the French Alps, in Austria, pretty much everywhere we go, we find some hikes, some less strenuous than others.
So that's really neat that you've been doing that for so many years. And I bet it was even more exciting once you learned that they were building this exciting trail in Romania. How did you learn about the Via Transilvanica, and how did you decide to start hiking sections of it?
So I first heard about it. I think I first heard about it in 2020. I followed the social media pages of Principele Nicolae of Romania, which is our version of a prince. He is the grandson of our last king of Romania, King Michael. And he is very involved with the trail. So he did a lot of trail work. He hiked portions of the trail. He's very involved. And then I was like, oh, Via Transilvanica. And in the context of 2020, it was great because we all needed something to look forward to dream of. If you think of that book by Viktor Frankl, I think Searching for the Meaning of Life, I kept that in the back of my mind the whole time, like we need something to look forward to. And we planned and we talked about where we're going to stop and what we're going to buy. So it was a good COVID dream. And then in 2021, when we were allowed to travel abroad, that's when we started it. So we did 3 days in 2021, 3 days in 2022, and 3 days in 2023.
Okay. And do you have plans to do more parts of it?
Yes, I think it's becoming a lifelong project. The reason we are not hiking more than 3 days is because we're hiking with friends and they have commitments, and we also work some while we're there. So we usually hike a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. And also when I go to Romania, I go home and there's other things I want to do. And I want to hike my own trails behind my mom's house and see friends and visit. So I don't want the trail to take the whole time. So that's why the 3 days, yes.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But one question I have about that is, are you hiking it 3 days at a time from beginning to end, or are you just picking sections that you think are the most scenic or something like that?
So yes, we are hiking 3 days at a time, beginning to end. It's easier like that. So like I said, it starts in my county, about an hour and a half away from Gura Humorlei, which is my hometown. And it crosses over the Carpathians one time and goes through the Transylvanian plateau. And it crosses over the Carpathians again. And it ends where the river Danube comes into Romania. So 1,400 kilometers, which is like 870 miles. And like 60 something days. So yes, it's probably going to take us a while. Some days, some of the upcoming days can be done 2 in 1, depending if we feel like it, because they're shorter and not as strenuous, because again, we're on the other side of the Carpathians. That's where we left the trail.
So there are something like 68 sections of the trail. And what you're saying is you could actually put a couple of those together at times because they're not as strenuous, particularly if you're only doing a few days where you don't need to worry about pacing yourself so much. You could do 2 sections in one day at times.
That's right. So it all depends on the fitness level. The trail is pretty accessible at every point. Romania has a good train system. It's not the most modern train system, but you can pretty much get anywhere you want by train. And there's night trains. And then maybe look at the guide and find the phone number of a local guide that can transport you from the train station to the trail. So it can be done pretty much everywhere easily. So it's not like you're deep in the woods and the only way to get there is by hiking 5 days or so.
So one thing you said before we move on and talk more about this trail is that you used to do lots of hiking when you were young in the area that you grew up. And I'm wondering, and I understand that too. I did a lot of that myself and where I grew up, and it's always fun to just sort of explore randomly. But were there also other long distance kind of trails or 2, 3, 4, 5 day kind of hikes you could do in Romania? Or is this a new phenomenon?
This is a first, and it's fantastic in the context of this emerging country, I will call it, in this newly developed country. It is such a big accomplishment to actually see this, because the AT, we take it as it is. Like, I have no idea. I mean, we're an hour and a half south from the start of the AT. I don't really know who started it. I don't know the context, how hard it was. But this trail, I've actually seen and followed their efforts and their fundraising efforts and their planning and how they change things around. And it's cool because I feel like it's mine too, in a way, although, I didn't really do anything. I'm doing something now, but yes.
I was going to say, exactly. You're doing something now to help promote it, and you're getting out there and hiking on it, which helps the local communities who are along the trail.
That's right. That's right. And that's a huge part. And that was a big effort for the people involved, is getting the people to see it and to understand that all of a sudden you have tourists in your little mountain village, and there's income and there's people going to the little stores, because Bukovina is very touristy. There's a lot of medieval monasteries, and we've always had a lot of tourists. I grew up with tourists from all over the world, although I grew up in a communist country. So Bukovina is a different story. But once you cross the Carpathians, these villages, they don't have a hotel. They have guest houses. They don't even have bed and breakfast establishments. They have guest houses. And those would have not been there without the trail. And there are also these, they call them gastronomical points, which are not restaurants. They are homes in which the lady of the house, the cook, or I guess it could be the guy, but they set up a menu for the Via Transilvanica people. And we had that experience, and I think we had 6 courses. The food kept on coming and coming. So that's a great opportunity and a job for somebody who maybe never worked outside of the house.
That's fantastic. And one of the things you mentioned, I think, to me when you reached out about this trail is that you eat a plant-based diet, and that on this trail, it was actually not that difficult. I imagine there's lots of great locally grown produce that these small villages where the homes are that they can cook, and that you were actually able to eat pretty easily following the trail on a plant-based diet. Could you talk a little bit about that?
That's right. I have been on a plant-based diet for 15 years now, and so is my husband. And Romania is a country that has somewhat of a Mediterranean kind of diet mixed in with Turkish a little bit. But Romanian people fast about 6 months out of the year. And their fast is actually a plant-based diet. So if we travel, and then we were on the trail first year, the third year, for the fast of St. Mary, which we celebrate on August 15th. So pretty much everybody's fasting, and the restaurants have the regular menu, and at the end they have menu de post, which is a fasting menu. So it's not very hard. It's not like when you tell people I don't eat meat or I'm on a plant-based diet, they don't look at you if something's wrong with you. They're like, oh, okay, well, you can have this. And they're very accommodating. So we did not starve at all.
That's fantastic to hear. I didn't realize that they had so many fast days in Romania and for religious reasons. So that's pretty interesting that they would just be very used to people not eating meat for significant periods of time. And that really does make it easy.
It does. And the trail goes through some big cities that have bigger stores, and you can pick up granola bars or something from there as well. And what we did in the backpack, we all carry these tin containers. I think they're from United by Blue, but they can be from anywhere. Kids put them in school lunches. So we carry them with us, and we ask the host or the chef at the restaurant to cook us another meal. So we pretty much order 2 dinners, and we pack one, we put it in the fridge, we pick it up in the morning after breakfast, we eat it on the trail.
What time of year is the time to do this? I think, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I think Romania probably has some real winters, and this is really a summer. I don't know how far into spring or fall you could go, but if somebody wanted to hike a significant section, what's the season for doing this hike?
Again, it depends on where they will start. If they start in Bukovina, I would say it has to happen after May, because otherwise it's wet and muddy and you're crossing the mountains and you don't want to be miserable. But if you're in the Transylvanian plateau, it's different. So I would start after May. July historically has some rains and sometimes floodings in the middle of July. I have hiked in August first time, middle of July missed the rain second time, and in August again the third time. September is again very nice. So yes, summer months.
If somebody wanted to hike the entire 1,400 kilometers or 870 miles, they could do it in a little over 2 months, or even probably around 2 months. So they might be able to squeeze it in after the rains and do it in August and September.
That's right. Depending on the pace, yes. There are a bunch of people that actually completed the whole trail in one hike. So yes, it can be done. I'm assuming it's also a big challenge, but if people have the time and the determination, yes, they should definitely do it.
How do you think about the difficulty of this hike? You have the Carpathian Mountains that you talked about. I assume there's a lot of up and down there, but then you're on a plateau after that. And I know you haven't hiked all of the hike yet, but what is your understanding of how difficult this is to do?
Okay, so I'll tell you how the first day was. It was fairly flat, and we kind of thought, hey, this is not bad. It was just kind of like a walk in the woods. And then the second day was so hard. It was abrupt. First of all, so the AT, and I'm going to use the AT as a reference a lot because it's so close and we've been on it so many times, it zigzags a lot. Well, Via Transilvanica seems to just go uphill. and then you think, oh, that must be the end. And you get up there and no, there's more, but you couldn't see that from below. So it's really abrupt at times. And you asked me about temperature, so we started in Putna in August, and it was chilly. It was like maybe in the high 50s. It was chilly that morning. It had just rained. So mountain weather, right? If it rains, then it's going to be cold. So you need to have long sleeves, a rain jacket, maybe a hat. And then again, although we were hiking and it was warm, once we hit reached a peak, it got really cold. So we had to put our clothes back on. So although hiking in the summer, you kind of have to prepare for a little bit cooler weather. And yes, so the Bukovina sector is strenuous. It's beautiful. If you love the mountains, it's fantastic, but it's strenuous because the Carpathians over there, it's not just you hike over them and you're done. I think you hike over them 3 times.
Okay.
So it's valleys and back up and back up. So it's not easy, but then it levels out some. So it all depends on the level of fitness and how much you can and you want to get out of the trail.
What do you need to carry on a hike like this? You have these accommodations where you're staying in sort of local homes, essentially. What kind of equipment do you need to carry? Is it pretty much just a day pack, or do you need to carry more equipment?
No, a day pack. I have a Osprey Kite, 36 liters. And the reason I have it is because it's very comfortable. And I have the food containers and clothes for 3 days, but very light. And then my husband has a bladder, I don't know what else to call it, a water thing. And I carry bottles and that's it. You know what? I also carry, because we're on a plant-based diet, I buy the instant oatmeal packs, and I carry those. They make breakfast quite easy. Mix them with some fruits and nuts, and that's about it. I don't carry a phone on the trail, which is such a blessing. We usually hike with friends, so in between us there's 3 or 4 phones, and I don't carry a phone on the trail, and it is such a blessing. It's fantastic, carefree. But now I'm glad somebody carries a phone because there's an app. And then one thing with the hotels or the bed and breakfast establishments, you have to confirm the day before that you're coming, so it's good to have a phone, and for safety reasons too, and for photos, but not me.
So you basically have your own personal secretaries who carry the phone for you. That's
right. And they're not upset with me. I haven't heard any of them say, hey, get your own phone.
So it sounds like then with the accommodations, you don't need to carry sleeping bags or things like that. You have bedding, you have they take care of all of that for you.
That's right. And that is such a blessing. I mean, we hiked sections of the AT, but then you have to camp on the trail. And the fact that you don't have to camp on the trail and there's a shower at the end of the day, it is so nice. And like I said, Bukovina is very touristy, so the accommodations are much nicer and the comfort is higher. Of course, you pay a little extra, but nothing compared to, it's still Eastern Europe. I think it's like $30 a night or so on average. But once you step out of the tourist areas, the accommodations are kind of basic, but still nice, but basic.
But still very affordable. So even if you're someone who's a younger person who maybe doesn't have a lot of financial resources, it's probably not going to be that expensive to use the accommodations instead of trying to illegally camp or something like that.
That's right. Some people have camped out on the trail, but essentially they ask the owners of the house guests to camp out in their backyards.
Okay.
So not that many people camped out the whole trail. Even those people, it seems like they stayed in some of the hotels or house guests along the way.
Yeah, that's interesting. And there are some trails where there's sort of a split between people that stay in accommodations and people that camp. And it sounds like here, because the cost is so pretty low compared to a lot of parts of Europe, it's probably a good idea also to patronize these local villages and give them your business. And I guess even if you were camping, you'd probably be taking advantage of the meals. Like you said, if you're camping in the yard, you'd at least want to buy food. And so you might as well you probably get a room for fairly cheap anyway.
Exactly. $30, $40. Sometimes the food is included in the $30 or $40. That's very affordable.
Now, how far apart are the villages, and how far do you have to walk each segment? Is it a pretty doable day most of the time?
Yes. First day, like I said, the one that was very easy. I think we finished maybe at 3 p.m. And I still had a lot of energy and adrenaline. And Weston and the friends, Georgia and Alina, they went and rested. And then I visited with the host, and I went in their orchard. I checked out the creek. I was quite bored. I was like, okay, now wake up. And the village was Sucevița, that also has a medieval monastery, an active monastery. And it had just rained a little bit and the sun was setting. And because of COVID, the service was kept outside. And it was the Holy Transfiguration. I wasn't familiar with the holiday, but it was a very surreal experience. So the sky was all red for the sunset. We had just hiked the first day, and we had dreamt about this for a long time in the context of COVID in 2020. And the service was outside, and it was beautiful. So a fantastic memory there. Otherwise, the second, third, and the other days in Bukovina were pretty hard and strenuous. I say maybe we reached the accommodations around 5, 6 p.m.
Oh, wow. That's a long day.
Yes, because we stopped for lunch, and then we met people along the way that we chatted with. And the main thing, and I really don't want to forget this, Bukovina in the summer is full of wild fruit.
Oh, okay.
So we have wild strawberries. They're very small, maybe the size of the fingernail of your pinky. They're called frage, like fragola, the Italian fragola. And then you have huckleberries, and then you have raspberries. But there's so many. So you stop and eat. Now you also have to be careful, as in like really careful, because somebody else likes to eat the forest fruit. So you have to be alert and make noise to make sure that you don't stumble upon the bear that doesn't expect you to be there.
Sure.
He's just having a snack. But yes, so much fruit, and it's wild fruit full of vitamins and nutrients because nobody plants it. And so that's a big treat on Via Transilvanica.
You mentioned that there's an app for the trail and that other folks in your group would use the app to help navigate, but also they have a really fantastic signage system. Could you talk a little bit about how it's set up and how it is to follow the trail?
Yes, they have an amazing system, and I'm very grateful for that, because you and I know that it's not very fun to get lost on a trail, mostly if you're there with kids and they're ready for this much, or you get lost and you're hungry and it gets dark. So it's just so important to know your way and not get lost. So every kilometer there is a borna, which is a andesite. Andesite, I think, is the material is made out of. It's essentially a mile marker or a kilometer marker. And it's also a unique piece of art. So they had a camp, they had a Tășulesa. Tășulesa is the organization that set up Via Transilvanica. They had a camp with all these Romanian artists. So every single mile marker borna is a piece of art. So you have those every kilometer, and they're so nice because you're hiking and all of a sudden you hear somebody from your group up ahead says Borna, so you know you're on the right path. And then you see the orange sign, the T. It's on trees, on posts. In the 9 days that we were on the trail, we only got slightly sidetracked twice. Once was when we passed a sheep stall. They have these high in the Carpathians for the summer, and I think some kids maybe messed up with the signs. So we hiked up this hill called Petricica, which means little rock, because there were a lot of little rocks and we were sliding. So that was frustrating. And then we were like, wait, this cannot be it. So we immediately pulled, well, I didn't. They pulled up their phones and the map. And even though you may not have internet there, you can tell that you're off it and it's easy to go back on it. And then the second time was last year. Well, we could see the signs, but they were a little too far from us. So we realized that we went left too much. And instead of going back, we just kind of crossed a field and we continued on. So it's pretty much impossible to get lost on Via Transilvanica, and I am so grateful for that. And the signs are both ways. So we are hiking it northeast to southwest. If somebody decides to hike it the other way, the signs point the other way as well. So
What is based on your knowledge of Romania and the terrain that this covers, what is your feeling about that? Should people hike it from Bukovina? Is that the best direction to go? Or do you think it makes a difference?
Well, I'm kind of biased because I am from Bukovina. So I would say, of course, that's the right way to do it. um, they can do it any way they want. It's nice because after you cross the Carpathians, you end up at the Tășuleasa campus. And there you learn the story of the trail. And you get to hang out with the people that set up the trail. And then you have a stronger connection to the trail, in the story behind it. So I like this. And also you get to get a taste of Romania from the beginning because Bukovina is so intense. So I would say yes, start from Putna.
Okay, if you're going to start from Putna and Bukovina, how do you get there if you've never been to Romania?
Yes, that's a very good question. There is an airport, a Suceava airport. It's a small airport. They have flights out of London, Luton. So the easiest way would be to fly into London and then connect to London, Luton by train or bus or something, and take this small Wizz Air flight into Suceava. And once you get to Suceava, there's public transportation to the train station, or you can take a taxi or an Uber. The best thing would be not to just hop in a car. There are people that they may want to take advantage and say, so you ask if there's a meter, and you have to make sure there's a taxi sign. So just exercise caution. Otherwise, you'd end up paying a lot more for a short ride to the train station. And then once at the train station, there is a train or maybe multiple trains a day into the village of Putna.
Okay.
Also, the guide has different phone numbers of local people. And if that doesn't work, once you get off the plane, you can just have a driver wait for you and drop you off at the trailhead. And then I thought about this for the show to recommend if some people want to hike with poles. And if they don't check luggage, they cannot put the poles in. And there's a Decathlon, which is a kind of like a cross between REI and Dick's Sporting Goods in Suceava. And you can go get poles there or anything else you may have forgotten. And then there is another very good mountain store after Sadova. Sadova is a point on the trail. It's like a very small REI. We got our hiking shoes, a second pair of hiking shoes on clouds from there. So they have pretty much everything that a Western store would have. And I was going to say, so people could fly into Bucharest, which is the capital of Romania, and then they can take a short commuter flight into Suceava, or they can take a night train to Suceava, or they could fly into Iași or Cluj, pretty much any major city. But the most convenient would be flying to Suceava, which is SCV, the airport code, and you're pretty much right there.
Okay, that sounds great. And I take your point about avoiding the illegal taxis. That happens in a lot of parts of the world. And it's always an unpleasant experience when you end up paying a lot more than you should have. And that's your first experience in a new country. It's happened to most of us who travel quite a bit. So it is something to look out for. And Uber is always a good option so that you know what you're getting.
That's right. It even happened to me. It's my home country. So exercise caution.
For people who've never been to Romania, never seen the Carpathians or the Transylvania Plateau, I think I mentioned in my last episode that the movie Cold Mountain was actually filmed in Romania, which is incredible to me at the time. But now thinking about Romania, what does this area look like? What are people going to experience in hiking in the Carpathian Mountains and also on the Transylvania Plateau and beyond that?
Yeah, so Romania is a fairly big country for that part of the world. It's about the size of Oregon, the state of Oregon. 19 million people live there. We have a little bit of everything. So I mentioned the Danube River, which is a big river, and it gets bigger as it gets closer to Romania. And it flows into the Black Sea in Romania, and it creates a delta, which is a biosphere reservation. There's tons of birds and fish. It's just really beautiful. I've never been. I've seen pictures, but
Okay.
it is beautiful in the pictures. And so we have the Black Sea, we have the mountains, we even have mud volcanoes. So we have a little bit of everything. So minus the desert. The Black Sea has all these nice resorts along the way. We have lakes, we have thermal waters, and we have mineral waters. The trail goes through Vatradorni, which is a city that's known for mineral waters. And actually, along the trail, one would see all these springs that different companies, big companies, have tapped into. And in Poiana Negri, you can see the bottling facility for the Poiana Negri mineral water. But in Vatradorni, where the trail actually goes to, there are public springs in the city, public springs of mineral water. So you can just go there with a bottle and taste the mineral waters.
That's interesting. And are the Carpathians a pretty high mountain range, or are they kind of rolling hills? Are they more sharp peaks? And then on the plateau, is it a high altitude, or how does that feel walking in that area? Is it pretty different kind of terrain?
They're called the Carpathian Alps, but they're not the French or the Swiss Alps. The highest peak is 8,300 feet.
Okay.
And that's further down. It's not where Via Transilvanica crosses the Carpathians. So you can see snow-capped peaks along the way. That's not, if you're going the summer, that's not where Transylvanica takes you. But yes, high altitude, at least for that area. And I was going to talk a little bit about the forests. They're mainly mixed forests. In Bukovina, you have a lot of virgin forest, fir, spruce, beech, birch, and some pine. Different than the Georgia pine, a more hardy kind of pine, and a lot of wildlife. I mentioned the bears. We have not seen any, but that doesn't mean there aren't any. We have gotten pretty close once, and we knew what the bear had dined on.
Okay, I understand.
And we exercised caution by singing and making the bear aware that we were there. But no, we had not seen any. We had seen some deer maybe, but nothing like out of the ordinary. There is one Romanian animal that my husband saw, and I was going to look it up for the show. It has little fangs like Dracula, and I don't know the name of it. It's kind of like a weasel. It's a cross between a weasel.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know the name of it. But I've never seen one in the wild, and we have seen, or my husband has spotted one in high in the Carpathians. They don't attack people, so no worries there.
So that's interesting that it has a lot of virgin forest. And I don't know if I read this or you mentioned it, but it's quite a bit of forest compared to most of Europe, right? Like most of Europe, the forests have been cut down for humanity, essentially. And I think Romania still has quite a bit of forest compared to everywhere else. And
the key word there is still. The scenery is changing a lot. But yes, there's still a lot of forest. I think 30% of the Romanian land is forested. So, and because of that, we have I think the largest bear population in Europe because we have so many forests.
So one thing I thought would be good was to go through the different sections. Via Transilvanica website lists the sections of the trail. And I think we've talked quite a bit already about Bukovina. But maybe if I go through the sections, you could just say a little bit about each of them and what you know. And I know you haven't hiked all of these sections, but maybe you know something. You're my only Romanian expert I've ever met, so you're going to have to know something.
That's right. And I'm not even that much of an expert because I haven't lived there for 20 so years. But yes, I'll try. I'll try my best.
So I think we've talked about Bukovina, but if there's anything else you want to say that you can. But if not, the next section is called the Highlands.
Yes, I do want to say something because I talked about the animals and I mentioned summer dwellings, the sheep stalls. They have shepherd dogs. And this is very important, not just on Via Transilvanica. This is very important for anybody visiting Romania. These are not doodles that you go and pet and you say, hey, can you smell my hair? No, no, no. These are these are dogs that have a job. And the ones that are guarding the sheep are big. They're about the size of a Saint Bernard. It's a type of dog, Bukovinan Chobanesc or Chobanesc Mioritic. And they're big and they can be intimidating. Their bark is intimidating. The nice thing on Via Transilvanica, the shepherds know there's tourists or hikers coming. Again, don't run, don't do anything silly. They are doing their job. Maybe just kind of go around a little bit, give them a little space. They're also letting you know they're there and that's their job and they're guarding the sheep. So that's something to keep in mind. Do not try to pet them.
That's
just
good
kind of
advice.
keep on going. Yes, yes. And usually the shepherd is there and they will call them and they listen for sure. Like last summer, at some point we saw 7 of them and usually don't see that many. So we just kind of sat back to back in like a little small circle and the dogs came and sat around us and watched us. The shepherd came, talked to them. The shepherd left. They all kind of left, but they kind of still watched us to make sure we're not up to some funny business with their sheep or the shepherd. So that is very important. And I want people to be aware of that. They're not really pets.
That's an interesting point. And I think it's probably something that will develop over time, right? As the shepherds and the dogs get used to seeing more and more tourists coming through, it won't seem so foreign to them either. And they'll probably start to understand how that relationship is supposed to work. But I can see why that might be something where they're just not sure what to make of people who are coming through walking, because it's not something that they're used to seeing.
That's right, because some of those areas are really wild and remote. So again, it goes through villages. You go up and down and into a village and then you hike back up, but you can go for miles and miles without seeing a human. And it's quiet. All you hear is birds. And yes, I can see the dogs being like, what are you doing here?
Exactly.
This is my territory. But going back to your question, so after Bukovina is the highlands area, and we left the trail there. Like I said, the Tășuleasa campus is there. And since I'm talking about it, I want to say that there's 2 brothers that started this trail. They have a nonprofit, Alin and TB Ușeriu, or maybe Ușeriu. I'm not sure exactly how do you pronounce it. They did, before Via Transilvanica, they did all kinds of other projects, and they're still involved in doing all kinds of other projects. But this is their brainchild, and it's a huge project. TB is the more famous one for some good reasons and for not some good reasons. He has quite the life story. He had written a book about his life story, and the proceeds from that book were the brick, the first money that went into the trail.
The seed money, maybe.
The seed money, that's right. So TB he had quite a interesting past. He is a ultra marathon runner. He won the Arctic Ultra 3 times in a row. They both live there with their families, and they're very humble and very nice and very willing to share about the story and about Via Transilvanica. And when we were there this summer, this was like fantastic. So we got there and there were other people from around the world, either volunteering or they just happened to be there. And we had a meal, we shared a meal, and somebody pulled out a guitar, and Weston, my husband, started playing. And this was a surprise. Oh, well, it wasn't a surprise because I expected it, but it was huge that it happened there. So the campus is on top of a mountain and surrounded by other mountains. And that night was the meteor shower because it was August. August is Perseids, right? So no ambient light. We just lay down on the grass and watched the stargazed. Awesome. It was fantastic, fantastic memory. So yes, so that Tășuleasa is in the highlands. So this is the Transylvanian plateau right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then it wraps around, it ends in, not it ends. Another nice stop is the Lacu Ursu area. The lake is a geothermal lake, so it stays the same temperature throughout the year. I've actually been there. It's pretty nice. There's also a salt mine that's no longer a salt mine, but now some sort of funky museum. So that's in the area. And then I'm kind of, because I don't know specifically what's in every single section, I'm kind of just going to give you the highlights.
Yeah.
I know the trail goes through Sighișoara, which is a medieval town, a very well-preserved medieval town. And that's where Vlad the Impaler was born. And there's a house with that.
I didn't know if I should be asking about that, because of course that's the most interesting thing to us, from the United States who have never been to Romania. And I'm sure, I'm saying this now, who knows, but I'm sure when I do my intro, I'm going to look into the history there. And I've watched the Netflix series about him and all of that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting story.
That was a good documentary, the Vlad versus Mehmet.
Vlad versus Mehmet. Yeah, that was really interesting. So
that was really good. Yes. So the trail goes through Sighișoara, where he was born. I mean, he was a medieval prince. Nobody really knows in which house he was born, but I guess there is a house that claims to be the house. And then the trail goes through this Dacian fortress. So Romania, before it was Romania, it was Dacia. We were conquered by the Romans in 105, 106. And that's why we speak a Romance language. Mm-hmm. So Romanian is a language similar to French, Spanish, Italian. And there is one of those Dacian fortresses there, at Samița Jetuza. And then the trail goes again over the mountains. And like I said, it ends in Drobeta Turnu Severin, where the Danube enters the country. And there is also a foot of a bridge from the Roman era, the Traian Emperor era. And it was designed by Apollodor of Damascus. So that's there as well. So these are kind of the highlights along the way for the trail.
And so when are you next going to go back?
Yes, we're going to go back in August again for the next 3 days on Via Transilvanica. We're going to go through Bistrița. I believe there's a nice lake there. Some of the kids said they wanted to join us because we are traveling with friends from university. I went to university in Romania and in the United States, but I kept in touch with my friends from there. And Alina and George are good traveling partners. We traveled to Ukraine with them, and because that's really important. You need to like the people you're traveling with.
Absolutely, yes.
And the trail is such an opportunity to catch up because we all have kids, and when you get together, everybody has something to say and da-da-da-da-da. But on the trail, when we're there, just us, we have plenty of time to catch up and tell stories. So, which we hiked with Alina and George the first year and the third year. And by the way, George is very passionate about history, and his trail name is George Transilvanicus. And that's really funny. But it's really nice because we get somewhere and we're like, I'm wondering what this is. Oh, Georgie, what is this? And then he goes on and on. So it's really, really nice. And then the second year we hiked with Tony, my English teacher from middle school.
Nice.
And I want to share this story because it's really funny. I had spreadsheets with what to pack and then spreadsheets about the trail. And we knew Alina and Georgie couldn't join us that year because they were traveling. And I said, I'm sure we'll find somebody to join us because we would have been just fine hiking by ourselves, but it's nice to be with friends. And I didn't seem to find anybody interested. And the night before, I was like, I'm probably going to hang out with my English teacher from middle school. So I texted her, and this is the night before. I texted her and we were talking, and I was like, by the way, I'm going on Via Transilvanica tomorrow. She's like, really? I would like to do that. I was like, well, do you want to join? And she's like, I'm thinking about it. So I sent her, I was like, okay, send me an email. And I sent her the spreadsheet. And she made a decision on the spot. No training, no mental preparation, nothing. She just went in the attic and picked up her backpack and went to the Lidl grocery store and picked up a rain cover, like the one that the tourists wear. And I said, okay, so if you're doing this at 7 a.m., we're going to be at your house and we're going to drive up to the trailhead. And she did it. She did it. And gosh, she did great without, again, she lives in Gurahmole, my hometown, plenty of mountains around, everybody trains and we walk everywhere, right? But she did it. So that's fantastic. And she joined us again the third year on the trail. So we have a pretty good group now of 5. We have a lot of fun. Yes. So, and now that some of the kids may join us.
That's cool. Yeah. Their training is called living.
That's right. That's right. And that was, yes, that was my training for the first part of my life. And I miss it. And I think it's such a privilege to be able to walk to the grocery store, to walk to school, to walk to work. And there's a psychological component to this because you have that time in nature, or maybe even run into a friend on the way back. So you don't go from sitting in front of the computer to the car where you probably you should listen to this podcast, but you probably listen to the news. Yes. But then, so you go from a very tight computerized environment to another one, while where you're walking or biking to school or work, it's almost like therapy, daily therapy. And then you get to experience the weather, all kinds of weather, and you get to feel the wind and the rain. And this is important for the mental health. It is. And it's something that we don't have access to everywhere in the world. And that is definitely a privilege.
That is very well put. For someone who's never been to Romania, why would you say this is a trail that they should go and try to experience?
It's because Romania has been so sheltered from the outside world. We were communists till 1989. So post-World War II till 1989, a huge chunk of history. Nobody could travel outside. Some people got in. Then we had, and maybe we still are, in a transition kind of period, and we joined the EU in 2007, maybe. So it is like a time capsule, a little bit, kind of like we think of Cuba, a little bit of a time capsule.
Yeah.
So some of the villages are true time capsules, and they also speak of the history there, because in Bukovina and in Transylvania, you will hear German, and you will stumble upon a Hungarian village and a Polish village. So yes, so you hear all these languages, and even Romanian is spoken differently on different sides of the mountains. So, but usually when I speak Romanian, everybody knows where I'm from. It's kind of like if you're from the south of the United States of America. Yes, so that would be a thing, just going and experiencing history. And the other thing is the trail is very well marked, right? It's new. It's less expensive. And it's a challenge. I don't know, go see something else and something new. Because all the other trails, we've heard of them, we've seen them, but this is new. So yeah, that's my sales pitch for Via Transilvanica.
I'm completely sold. I totally want to try at least part of this trail at some point.
That's right.
And I've heard great things about Romania as a country, as a place to visit as well, and Bucharest as well. So I would love to go visit the cities and then also try some of the hiking. So I think everyone else should consider it.
That's right. And if people do go and say they do 6 days or 9 days or 2 weeks, there's obviously other things to see. Since we were a constitutional monarchy up until World War II. Then there's the Peleș Castle, which is the summer residence of the Romanian royal family. That's in Transylvania. And then Bran Castle, that's marketed as Dracula's castle. Although there's not that much. He was in prison in that castle. But anyway, it is Bran Castle. and another thing that people see a lot. And then Bucharest has a lot to see. Although Bucharest was kind of butchered by the communists,
Okay.
it still has some remnants of the kings and queens of Romania. And then there's Iași, that's very beautiful, and the castles there. So there's a lot to see in Romania besides the trails. So if somebody were to make the trip, because it's quite the trip, then they could see all the other things, and like the Danube Delta and like the Black Sea, like I said.
And I would guess from what I'm hearing from you that if somebody wanted to do maybe a week on the trail and then, a week in other parts of Romania, that you would probably suggest that the first parts of the trail, not just because you're from there, from Bukovina, but also because this is where the Carpathian Mountains are. And then you've got the highlands right after that. So maybe that would be a good section for people if they're just going to have a week.
That's right. And Bukovina has the first 3 days are in 3 villages, like I said, with medieval monasteries that are inhabited by either monks or nuns. And I have a funny about the beginning of the trail. The first day, we had gone there the night before, and we had breakfast. The breakfast we packed. But then we went to the monastery because we have little passports, just like the Camino. We have little passports, so you want to get a stamp. So we went to the monastery, and we asked one of the priests there to give us a blessing, and that was very nice. It was a very peculiar kind of prayer. It involves some wild animals protection or something.
Cool.
So we had that. And then they said, go to the museum and get your passport stamp. The museum was closed because it was very early in the morning. But then they directed us towards their cantina or chow hall. So we get there, they stamp our passport. And granted, we had just eaten breakfast. And then they, in the spirit of a Romanian monastery, they say, would you like to have breakfast? They said, would you like to have breakfast with us? And I know monastery food is so good.
Okay.
So we said yes. But we weren't going to sit with them because we're kind of going. So they packaged some food for us that we ate on the spot.
Perfect.
Yes, so we had that, and then we actually started the trail. So that's a nice memory right there. So yes, that's to be expected. These monasteries are painted monasteries, so they have frescoes on the outside. And it's interesting because people couldn't read in medieval times, but this was a way for people to learn the stories of the Bible, the Last Supper, or maybe to even learn what happens if you misbehave or something like that. So there are these frescoes, and Putna has the tomb of Ștefan cel Mare. Ștefan cel Mare is the Romanian prince, or Stephen the Great, cousin of Vlad Tepes, and he's the one that built most of these monasteries in Bukovina. I believe there's 36 of them. There's plenty of, but Via Transilvanica goes through 3 of them, and they all have specific colors. Moldovița, which is the 3rd stop, has green, I think, as a predominant color. And although they all have frescoes, the frescoes are different from monastery to monastery, but they're in the Byzantine style. So that's the style of the drawings on the walls of the monasteries.
Okay. That sounds really interesting. Yeah.
To answer your question, yes, start in Bukovina, definitely make it to Tășuleasa to meet the people and hear the stories. And that would be, I think, 8 days. Okay. And then it also goes maybe a 3rd day, ends in a lake, passes a lake, and it's a mountain lake. So, and then Vatadone is there as well, and with the mineral waters, like I said, and there's an old casino that has been restored, maybe 100 years old, and now it's an art museum. So, and there's some Art Deco buildings there. So it's kind of interesting. It's not just wood and nothing else, and a lot of well-preserved homes along the way in these villages. So it's like a cultural trip and a hike. So yes, at least those 8 days, start at Putna, go to Tășu, and then visit other parts of Romania.
Awesome. That sounds great. Well, Veronica, thank you so much for telling me about your hikes so far on the Via Transilvanica. And I wish you the best of luck in hiking more parts of the trail. And hopefully someday you will actually hike the entire trail.
That would be nice, right?
Yes, that would be cool. While I have you, though, I've got a few more questions if you don't mind.
Sure, sure.
So, what is one hike that you've done besides this one that others shouldn't miss out on?
There is a hike in Romania that I also like. It's called the Caraiman Cross. You can hike from Sinaia. Sinaia is the city that has the royal palace, the summer residence. It goes high up into the mountains, and there's usually snow up there. And then you end up at this massive cross, some sort of monument for one, and then there's the valley. The view is in front of you. It's pretty strenuous, but it's beautiful. So that's my favorite Romanian hike. And I have hiked in the Alps quite some last year in the Zermatt area. I liked that a lot. And Chamonix area is very nice for hikes. Like I said, we live very close to the AT. My favorite is a day hike from Neil's Gap to Blood Mountain.
Okay.
Very popular. You see a lot of true Appalachian trail hikers. So that's a favorite one for sure. So yeah, I would say those are my favorites.
Okay, those are some good suggestions for both in the US and in Romania. What's the next trip on your list?
Well, in May, we're going to something called Hike In. It's here in Georgia. So it's off the AT. You hike for 5 miles and then you spend the night in some sort of inn that's off grid. You cannot reach it but by horse or on foot. And then you hike 5 miles back, and our daughter's coming with us for that one. And then we're also going to start the Camino in the Camino Frances. Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yes, we've been training here with the Elena Camino chapter. I hear it's not as hard as the VT, but we'll see. And that is in July of this year. And then, of course, the 3 days on the VT. So that's the plan for this year.
For the Camino, are you hiking the end portion into Compostela, or are you hiking the beginning portion as Saint-Jean-Pierre-de-Port?
Yes, the beginning portion. The Camino we're planning on doing in 4 years. Now, we're not retired. We have a long way to retirement. So this is what we can do.
Right.
Portions at the time. Everybody has their own Camino. This is just how we do it. We could wait till we retire, but we may not be in shape. I don't know, or healthy. So we're going to do it now. But yes, so we're starting at Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port.
And I would tell everyone, don't wait.
Yes.
Whatever it is you want to do, don't wait, because you never know. And, you could get to that age and either have different priorities and not really want to do it anymore, or not have the health to do it anymore. So if you want to do it now, do it.
That's right. And I'm going to share a tiny bit of a personal story. My father passed away at 48, and they were hoping, my mother and my father were hoping that they were going to do all these wonderful things when they retire. And he didn't make it to retirement. So then Weston and I and Ilinka, we take every opportunity to just travel or explore or do things that we really like, because that's what we have. We have now, and we have each other. And yes, I totally agree with what you said. If you want to do something, don't wait. Go for it. Make it happen. Budget, I don't know, time, just make it happen. Kind of like my friend Tony, my English teacher. Mm-hmm. Just went with it.
Yeah, and that was a great story too, because people forget the value of spontaneity and how that can change your life in so many good ways when you're willing to just say yes to something. Somebody's giving you this opportunity, and it's easy to look at an opportunity like that. And she could have just said, well, I've got to do this tomorrow and I've got to do that the next day. And I have so many things that I'm busy with, or, oh, I'm not sure about this. But she got so much more out of it by just saying, yes, why not? And if the worst that could have happened is she had a bad time and she never had to do it again. But it turns out she loved it, and now she's going to go back and do more of it with you. And that's fantastic.
That's right. And the way the VT is, we call it the VT, the Via Transilvanica is set up. If you get injured or you get tired, just hop on the train and go back home. I mean, it's fine. And you cannot kind of quit halfway through the day. You cannot do that because you're probably somewhere up in the mountains. But finish the day, and if you're done, you're done. It's to be respected. You tried.
All right, last question. What is either the dumbest or the most resourceful thing you've ever done while you were hiking?
I think the best thing was to plan the meals, to pack the meals, to ask for a second dinner and pack that. I think that's the most important thing because it's pretty taxing on the body. You want to make sure you have the right fuel, and it's a system that works for us. And I think that's pretty good. You could pack some freeze dry food, but then it takes time, right? And energy, and there's not always water, and you kind of have to plan for that, and it's just more stress. And that's definitely the thing you don't want on the trail, stress.
I think that is a really resourceful thing to do, and particularly on this trail, because, for example, on places like the Tour de Mont Blanc, there are meals you can get to go, lunches, and they're fine, and they get you through the day, but they're not really home-cooked meals. They're typically just a sandwich and some packaged chips and an apple or something like that. But here you have an opportunity to get really a home-cooked meal that you can take with you and eat for lunch every day on the trail that's not that expensive. And so I think it's absolutely a great idea to do something like that and really make sure that you have lots of calories and high-quality food throughout your hike.
And they're truly home-cooked meals. Like I had heirloom green beans that I had not had in forever. And you kind of sit there and you brainstorm with the host, and they say, well, I can cook this, this, this. And you say, well, I would like this, maybe some beans, maybe this, or maybe some salad, or maybe an apple too. So it's not something pre-made. They won't shove a menu in your face. It's almost like a grandmother cooking and giving you options.
Veronica McGee, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me and for this opportunity to talk about Via Transilvanica.
Thanks again to Veronica McGee for coming on the show. And I hope that Veronica and I have inspired you to hike the Via Transilvanica, or at least a good section of it. And if you enjoyed this episode, tell a friend about it. Or better yet, give us a good review on whichever podcast service you use. And keep in mind that this podcast is entertainment and meant to spark your interest. If you decide to hike the trail, do your own research. Like anything else worth doing, outdoor adventure has risk. So when you go, pack your common sense. And when you get back, tell me how it went. Next time on Trails Worth Hiking, we are going back to the tallest mountain range on Earth for a trek where we will stay in welcoming tea houses and quaint mountain villages, where we'll eat freshly cooked dal bhat as we climb higher and higher toward Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on Earth. Next time on Trails Worth Hiking, we head back to the Himalayas of Nepal, and this time it's go big or go home as we trek to Everest Base Camp. If you have any questions or feedback on this episode or ideas for future episodes, including if you want to be a guest and talk about a trail that you've hiked, reach out to me at trailsworthhiking@gmail.com. So start planning your next hike, and before you know it, you'll be on the trail. Thanks for listening.